What's up, everyone? And we are back. We're going to do some NFL season predictions. I did this a couple years ago, and then I did not do it last year. But now we're going to do this again. One take, pretty much just going to go through it, and then I'm going to show you how I have the playoff picture for this season as I went through and picked games for every single week, and I will include me showing all of them in this episode as well. So let's get into it. Week 1 action. The Thursday night game, Carolina versus Denver. I think Carolina's going to win in the rematch of the Super Bowl. I think the Trevor Siemian thing really gives Carolina quite the advantage. Rookie quarterbacks usually don't do well. I guess first-time starter quarterbacks usually don't do the greatest against pressure, and Carolina is going to be bringing plenty of it. Other than that, we'll go through the night games first. We'll finish with the night games actually. And I'll just go in a random order other than that. So Cincinnati and New York. I think Cincinnati's taken a step back this year. I think New York surprises them in week 1. I like a couple things about this matchup. Total bad offense versus good defense. Good defense for the Jets in terms of yardage anyway. Cincinnati had the second best scoring offense last year, but I think like 15th by yardage total. So I have Kansas City knocking off San Diego week 1. Not really much to say about that matchup. It's just I took Kansas City because they were at home. Baltimore beating Buffalo. I think Baltimore is going to be a little bit more competitive this year, and I think Buffalo is slightly overrated. So I think that they'll be able to pull out a week 1 victory. It's two very similar quarterbacks taking on one another, and Buffalo's got a lot of injuries on defense. So maybe they can contain them. Baltimore doesn't really have receivers, but you never know. I think that they're going to eke one out. Yeah, I guess said Carolina, Denver already. Green Bay, Jacksonville. I don't really think there's much debate about that one. I have Houston beating Chicago. Again, I don't really know what there's to say about that. Chicago's not the greatest. I think Houston is going to be an okay team this year. I think at least that they'll maybe be a win or two better. These standings I still haven't gone through and done the finals yet, but this is just my rough idea of how everything's going to look. Minnesota. I'm beating Tennessee. Tennessee still isn't the greatest team in the world. I think they'll have a few games where they surprise some people and they'll be a lot closer, but I ultimately think that they'll end up losing a lot of those games. I have New Orleans knocking off Oakland. I think Oakland is an overhyped team, and New Orleans is going to surprise them in week 1. I actually don't have all 17 of New Orleans games picked. I picked that one for the Saints. They went 7-9 last year, so that'd be about right. Miami and Seattle. Seattle, no contest there. Indiana and Detroit, these two teams are pretty similar talent-wise. I actually have them both finishing 8-8, but I'm going to take Indianapolis in this one. Arizona over New England, no Tom Brady. Otherwise, this would be a close game. I think Arizona is going to pretty much take this one pretty handily. Good defense. Even their offense might not even have to show up for this one. I just think the defense is going to win that one for them. Pittsburgh knocking off Washington. Washington's got a really bad defense. Pittsburgh has one of the best offenses in football. Even without Le'Veon Bell and Martavis Bryant, I still think they'll do a pretty good job. It might be a close game. This is the Monday night game. I forgot to talk about these two games over here, so I'll get to those. Tampa Bay, Atlanta. I have Atlanta knocking off Tampa Bay in that one. I think that division's going to be very close. With the bottom teams, but I think Carolina is going to pull away. I think Atlanta's going to struggle a lot early because their schedule is very rough, and then they finish against the NFC South, which I think is again going to be one of the worst divisions in the league. And I have New York, the Giants knocking off Dallas. It'll be an upset. It's a rematch of last year's first game, and I think the Giants are out to prove something in week 1, and they're going to try to stay competitive in more of these games than they did last year. And I have San Francisco knocking off LA. I think LA is a prime candidate for underperforming. There'll be another team. There'll be a team like they are every year, especially with the adjustment to LA. I think they're going to actually lose a couple games that they probably shouldn't. It's hard to move cities right away. A new stadium is usually a good thing for a team, and it'll reinvigorate them. But when you move cities, it's hard, especially moving from the Midwest out to Los Angeles. And I think San Francisco is a good week 1 upset candidate. So I'll go through these standings that I have pretty quick. I was still working on this because I think that I was trying to give Pittsburgh another game that they would lose, but I couldn't find it. I originally had them losing to the Ravens, so I still have them losing to the Ravens twice. But I have them beating the Bengals both times, I believe. I think the Bengals are still haunted by the playoffs. I don't think they're going to have a good year. They'll finish 9-7 just because their schedule's weak. I'll show that really quick. As you can see right here, they play the AFC East this year, and I think the Jets are poised for a big year, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. The Bengals have a pretty rough schedule right here. They play quite a few playoff teams. I think they'll lose to the Bills. I think that's a bad matchup for them. Baltimore 8-8 this year. They'll go 4-2 in the division. Cleveland 3-13. Not much debate about that. Houston, I tried to give a couple extra games to, but I think they're going to lose a lot of dumb games this year, especially toward the end of the season when they kind of they'll have the division unwrapped by week 17. So I just had the Titans beating them because I think they'll play backups, and the Titans will have a little bit to play for. Not really draft pick or anything, but just pride, I guess. I don't know. And I have them losing to the Chargers. I think the Chargers are going to have a couple upsets this year if their team stays healthy. Obviously, this is all assuming that all these teams stay healthy anyway. They have a kind of rough schedule this year. I have them losing to the Jaguars too. I think the Jaguars are going to steal a couple games this year. Ultimately, I think they have too rough of a schedule in the second half. I have them going. Well, actually 1-4 to start the season because I think the Bears will upset them that week. That should be an easy win, but I don't think it'll end up being one. Then I have them upsetting the Raiders. I think the Raiders are a prime team for a couple upsets this year. Being upset, that is. I think there's too much hype behind them. I think they're going to get too caught up in it. So yeah, the Jaguars play a lot of they have a rough time this year. They play the AFC West as well as the NFC. What NFC? Oh, they play the NFC North, it looks like. Yeah, they play the NFC North and the AFC. No, it must not be the AFC East. I don't really see what. Oh, AFC West it must be because the Raiders and the Broncos are both there. So, yeah, they'll have another rough year. New England, I have going 3-1 right here. Maybe they might lose to the Texans. Who knows? But out of those 4 teams, like the Cardinals are really the only challenge. I can still see the rest of their team doing enough to win all these other games, so I don't think that'll be much of a concern. Other than losing to the Steelers, I think that's a bad matchup for them, just with all the deep threats. And they'll lose this last game for seeding purposes because I had them as the top seed originally, and then somehow Pittsburgh ended up as them when I gave them an extra game. But I think they'll finish as the top seed. I think they'll be 12-4, and I think Pittsburgh will be 11-5. So the Jets might come as a surprise to you. They play 6 games against playoff teams in the first 6 weeks. So I have them losing to the Bills on Thursday night. It'll be kind of continued retribution for, well, I guess that was the wrong word, a continued struggle against the Bills. I think they got swept by them last year. Yeah, I believe so. They at least lost week 17 when they could have went to the playoffs. I had them beating the Bengals in week 1. Again, I think that's a good matchup for the Jets. I don't think they'll win against the Chiefs in Arrowhead. There's a case to be made, but I don't think they will. I have them beating the Seahawks at home because the Seahawks always get off to slow starts. They never have the greatest record for the first few weeks, and I think they're prone to some chemistry stuff in the early parts of the season. And I think the Jets at home is a bad matchup for them. They have a really good defensive line, and the Seahawks have a really bad offensive line. They have a couple good. The Jets have decent pass coverage. Not the greatest, but if they can neutralize the run game and get the pass rush going very easily, I think they're a pretty good matchup for the Seahawks. I think that'll be a rough game. It'll be close if they don't win anyway. The Steelers will beat them, Cardinals will beat them. Then they have this slate against 4 terrible teams where they play the Ravens, Browns, Dolphins, and Rams, and they'll probably go at least 3-1, if not 4-0. I have them going 4-0 in that stretch. Then they're going to lose to the Patriots. And then the rest of their schedule after that's pretty easy. The hardest game on their schedule after week 6 are the 2 Patriots games. I think they'll upset the Patriots in New England. They've split the last couple years, or last couple times they've been competitive anyway. 2 years ago they were just a mess, but they beat the Patriots last year. They split. I had them splitting again this year, and I think they'll beat the Bills in week 17. To improve by 1 game. They're kind of, and this has been said because of the Todd Bowles thing, but they're kind of like the Cardinals. A couple years ago, the Cardinals went 10-6 and missed the playoffs, and then the next year they were 11-5 and made the playoffs. As a wild card team, they went to Carolina and lost. The AFC West, I think, is going to be one of the most competitive divisions this year. I have 3 teams going over 500. Denver, The fall off shouldn't be too drastic for them. Sure, the quarterback thing is very real, but I don't think it'll be that big of a concern, honestly. Their defense is still incredible. So, maybe not as good as last year. They lost a couple key pieces, but they'll still be really good. So, Kansas City, they have kind of a rough schedule. I didn't realize. I have the Falcons upsetting them. I think they'll lose to the Panthers. Other than that, there aren't really any upsets on this schedule. Raiders maybe, but I don't really see that one as much. And then the Chiefs with the playoff spot wrapped up will blow this Week 17 game. They won't care. So Oakland, I have them losing a few rough games this year. I think they'll get shocked by the Saints in Week 1. I think the Ravens are a prime candidate to upset them. I wasn't sure. I'm probably not going to have both of these games like this, but the Ravens and the Jaguars, I think. Maybe not the Jaguars. I don't know. I think those are all these games that I have them losing are just kind of proof that they're going to be an inconsistent team. Maybe not proof, but they held to my belief that I think they're going to be a very inconsistent team this year, and they could go as easily go 13-3 as they could go 9-7, 8-8. So this is just what I kind of think is going to happen relatively. I was trying to get more of the records right than maybe necessarily the games. So keep that in mind. I have the Chargers going 7-9, 1-5 in the division. They have a rough schedule too, although they do play the AFC South and they play the NFC. Actually, I think they play the NFC South too. Yeah, they play the NFC South. I actually have them going 1 and where's the Saints game? Yeah, I'm going 1-3 against the NFC South. I think the only team they'll beat is the Saints. And if the Saints game was in New Orleans, I wouldn't even have them winning that. So, rough year for the Chargers. Better than last year. Not quite a playoff team again. But Green Bay, I think, is poised for a bounce-back year with Jordy Nelson. Plus, their schedule is so much easier this year than it has been before. They play the AFC South, which I believe I have them going 0-4 against... where's the Colts game? Yeah, so I have them going 4-0 against the AFC South, and they also play the NFC East. So they play, just like the Jets did last year, they play the two worst divisions, and I think that's going to contribute to it. I think they lose one interdivision game to the Vikings, but other than that, I think it's an MVP-type season for Aaron Rodgers, and the Pack bounced back pretty well. So Minnesota, even without Bridgewater, also again have a very easy schedule against the NFC East and the AFC South. So I think they'll be a game behind. It won't come down to the last week of the year again, but I don't really think it's that much of a drop off from Teddy Bridgewater, Sam Bradford in that system anyway. So I have the Panthers falling back quite a bit this year. They play the NFC West, I believe. Yeah. They play the NFC West, and they also play the AFC West too. So not necessarily the easiest schedule. I think they're going to lose to the Raiders. I think the Raiders are going to upset them. And then this last game against the Buccaneers, they're going to already have the division on lock. I just think they're going to throw that game away. And I have them losing to the Redskins too. I think the Redskins are going to be in a lot more games than people expect them to. And the big thing with the Redskins I have beating them is the Panthers are starting 2 rookie corners, and the Redskins have, I think, 5 good receivers. Maybe not Josh Doxson. I think he's injured, but Pierre Garçon, Deshaun Jackson, Jamison Crowder, and Jordan Reed are all really good. I think that's going to do it for them. I think that's a prime game for them to get upset in. I have New Orleans, Tampa Bay, and Atlanta all going 7-9. New Orleans has a terrible defense still, even with minor upgrades, but their offense is going to be enough to get them 7 wins again. Tampa Bay is kind of stuck in this limbo right now. They're taking a step forward, but it's a slow process. I think it's going to be a rough year again. I think next year is really the year that you should start looking for growth from them. And Atlanta, I just think, isn't a very good team. They are just not very good defensively. They have weak coaching, and Matt Ryan has been horrendous the last couple years. So I have Dallas going 10-6. This is one I kind of fought with for a while. I think that just playing the NFC East is really going to help them. They play the AFC North. I believe I have them losing to 3 out of the 4 teams there. The only team I have them beating is the Browns. And they play the NFC South, it looks like. Is that right? No, they play the NFC North because they play the Packers and the Lions. All right, so... and the Vikings too. I have them beating the Vikings. I think that's a game that the Vikings will kind of have a rough time with. But I think it's a pretty standard 10-6, 9-7 season for Dallas. I think the upgrade from all the backup quarterbacks they had last year to Dak Prescott, even whenever Tony Romo comes back, if he comes back, that will be a big thing for them too. I don't think it's going to be as rough of a year as it was last year. I think their team is still really good. So Washington 8-8, New York 8-8, and I have Philadelphia going 3-13. This is one that I really fought with for a while, but I don't really see them beating a lot of teams. Their offense is pretty weak. They have a bunch of like mediocre wide receivers. Like they'll get you like 800 yards a year, but they don't really have a number one. They have like a couple guys who might be okay in Dorial Green-Beckham and Jordan Matthews, but Jordan Matthews is really a number 2 receiver, and Dorial Green-Beckham is also a number 2 receiver. They have Zach Ertz, who's okay. Other than that, they're starting Carson Wentz, and they have no running backs, so I'm not very confident in their offense. Jim Schwartz is the defensive coordinator now, so that the defense should be better. I just don't think they're going to win very many games. I think it's 3-13 year, and the Browns are going to love that because they might have the number 1 and number 2 pick in this draft. I don't know how this doesn't rank how. No, they wouldn't have it. They would have. Well, actually, they might. No, they might have back-to-back picks, but one of them might not be number 1. San Francisco might jump them, but the way I look at it, Cleveland is going to have a couple of really good picks this year. New York, Washington, they go 8-8 every year, pretty much. So that's my logic behind that. I think Washington takes a step back this year. They play a lot of tough opponents. They play the NFC North, and they play the AFC North as well. So we'll move on to the final division, the NFC West. I have Arizona going 13-3. Incredibly easy schedule this year. The AFC East, I think the only team that they actually have them beating every team in the AFC East. And they also play, it looks like, the NFC South, which is, I think I have them going 4-0 against that too. The only games I have them losing all year are a game to the Seahawks and 2 games to the Rams, but I think that you can kind of negotiate whatever games they're really going to lose. I think they might lose to the Panthers. It's totally possible anyway. So I think they'll go 13-3, but I don't know if these games are exactly reflective of what they're going to do. And then the final team we'll look at is Seattle. I think this is kind of where they settle in every year. It's 10-6, maybe not the greatest division record in the world, but they do enough to make the playoffs. It's really what happens when you get in there. They get off to really slow starts usually. I have them going 3-3 to start the year, and then they're just kind of be lingering. I think that they have a lot of offensive line concerns. They play a lot of teams with good defenses, so it'll be a rough time for them. And I don't think their defense is going to be necessarily where it was the last few years because they keep losing pieces every year. But I think that they'll manage just enough to get into the playoffs. Seahawks are still an incredible team. I don't think they're quite as good as other people seem to be thinking, but I think that they'll do enough to make the playoffs. So that's going to do it for this preseason prediction plus week 1 predictions that I covered in the beginning of the video. I'm going to be resetting this view before the next time I do this next week, and I'll update it with everybody who won so you guys can see the standings on the side instead of these preseason predictions. So thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time or next week, I guess, for more predictions on week 2.